right now.
All right, guys, right on. Well, I'm happy to see all you guys. I'm happy to be here this Wednesday. Um, so my title of my message today is "It's the Season," right? And well, I mean, that's just it is the season, right? So yeah, look at this. I love that. So it's the season. So last week we talked about declaring. We talked about declaring who we are and that we will follow God come hell or high water. No matter what we're going through, we're talking about declaring who our new identity, who we are in Christ, and that we won't back down, right? Declaring those things over our life, declaring by our actions, declaring not just by talking it, but by walking it. By walking this life out with Jesus, declaring that, you know what, I have a new identity. I belong to heaven. I am a son of God. I'm a daughter of God. I'm a child of God. I am blessed. I am favored, and walking in that, right? Declaring that. But today, what I want to talk about, and then, and then what we were talking about is that we won't bow down to the world, right? I was talking about how Meshach, Rashach, and Abednego, they wouldn't bow down to the king, right? And so he's getting ready to throw them in the fire, and he says, you know what, if you don't bow down, I'm throwing you in the fire. And they say, you know what, you could throw us in that fire and our God's going to show up for us, but even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down to you. And so what they were declaring in that moment was that they were declaring, look, I trust in my God. I have faith that he has me, that he knows what he's doing in my life. So even if he doesn't show up, I'm not bowing down to you. And I was kind of taking that in my life. I take that as this: no matter what happens to me, no matter what the world does, no matter what goes wrong in my life, no matter what storm comes at me, I'm not turning back. I'm not going back to who I used to be. I'm not going to bow down because things get hard. You could throw me in the fire, and I know my God's going to show up for me in my life. I know that. But even if he doesn't, I'm not bowing down to you. I'm not bowing back down to the enemy. It's not happening. So we were talking about that. But today, I want to talk about is what it looks like in the season that we're in right now. What does it look like? What does that look like in the season we are in right now? Now, you might be saying, well, I'm in a different season than you, Bill. You might be somewhere different than me. Yeah, but we're all in a season, right? Some of us are in a season of blessing. Some of us are in a season of grief. Some of us are in a season of chaos. And some of us are in a season of whatever it is. We're all in a season. We all have a season that we're going through right now. So what we could be declaring in whatever season it's in, right? We could be those people in whatever season it's in. So how are we going to get the most out of the season we find ourselves in today? That's the question I'm asking myself. I've told you guys, I'm in a really cool season right now. I've come through a really hard season. I've come through a season, and it was a long season. It really was a long season of coming back to Jesus and being refined and being transformed and being restored, right? And all these cool things happening. But there was a lot of shedding. There was a lot of stretching. There was a lot of pain, and it wasn't easy. It was not an easy season. It was rough for me. But I learned a lot in that season, and I'm in a new season, but I'm in a really cool season. But what I don't want to do just because I'm in a good season now is forget about my God. What I don't want to do is get complacent. What I don't want to do is get nothing out of the season that I'm in, right? So what can we do to get the most out of the season that we find ourselves in today?
Sure. Sorry, forgot to mute.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. So what can we do to get the most out of the season we find ourselves in today? Whether good or bad, whether wet or dry, whether valley or mountaintop, God has something for us in this season. But it's our job to get it out of that season, right? Because what God is teaching us in this season, we're going to need it for next season. And he will allow us in certain things that we need to know. He will allow us to go around the mountain for 40 years if we need to get us woken up for the season that he's bringing us. So we need to not get discouraged. If we're in a hard season, right? Here's the key. or not the key, but this is the thing. We got to be careful that we don't get discouraged when we're in a tough season. When we're in a season of waiting on God, when we're in a season of hardship, when we're in the valley, we have to be careful we don't get discouraged. Now, when you're in a season like I'm in right now, where I'm in a good season, I feel like I'm on a mountaintop. I feel like I got to be careful that I don't get complacent. For me, like I was explaining last week, it's easier for me when I'm in a hard season, when I can see an enemy, when I can see something to fight and I have something to fight for. That's easy for me to stay on task. I mean, it comes in waves, right? But you have to breathe. So it comes in waves, but it's easier for me to stay focused on the task ahead when it's chaotic, because that's the life I came from, right? But when it gets easy, it's a little harder for me. And so I need to be aware, and I need to take into account my season, and that I need to not get complacent in the season that I'm in. So we need to get locked in and hold on to the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. In whatever season we're going through, we need to do that. And I want to look at what 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13 through 16 says. Chapter 1, verse 13 through 16. It says, "Therefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and rest your hope fully on the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." Look at that first part. I'm going to keep reading, but look at that first part. He says we need to be ready. Gird up the loins of your mind. That's be ready. Be ready. Be sober, not allowing all the chaos around you to get in, right? Be sober, be ready and be sober, and rest your hope fully on the grace to be brought to you. What's he telling us to do? To look to Jesus, to keep our eyes locked on the prize. That there's a hope that is coming. We're to lock onto that, to rest, and to rest your hope fully on that grace. So no matter what season we are in, we need to be locked in that. Then he says, as obedient children, do not conform yourself to the former lust. Don't fall back just because you're going through something, or just because something's really good. Be careful you don't fall back. Remember to be an obedient children. As you were not conforming yourself to the former lust, as in your ignorance. You're not ignorant anymore. You know what's expected of you. You're not a baby anymore. You've been taught these things. Don't go back to the old. But he who has called you is holy. You also be holy in all your conduct, for it is written, be holy, for I am holy. So here's something we all need to be doing no matter what season we're in. We need to be ready. We need to be resting our hope fully on the grace to be brought to us. And then as obedient children, we need to not go back to our old ways, right? We need to strive for that holiness that God's called us to. God's called us to be like him. Don't you want to be a chip off the old block? Don't you want to be, that's my son. That's my daughter. Come on. God's looking down at you. Look at me, Dad. No hands. I'm riding my bike. No hands. Look at me, Dad. Right? We need to rest our hope fully on him and strive for that holiness. Look, we're going to fall short a lot. It happens. But that's not a reason to give up. That's not a reason to go back. That's a reason to push forward. That's a reason to get better. So I want to look at, I'm talking about seasons, right? And I want to look at David. What happened to David in 2 Samuel 11, chapter 11, verses 1 through 5. And I just want to look at this season for David and kind of what happened with him. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I do want to, it's just something that came to my mind. So chapter 11, 1 through 5, it says, it happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle. Look at, in the spring of the year, in the season, right? In that season, it was the time when kings go out to battle. So that was the season, the battle season, right? When kings go out to battle. That David sent Joab, his servant, with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. So it was the season when kings went out to battle, but David didn't go, and he was king in that season. Then it happened that one evening David arose from his bed and he walked on the rooftop of the king's house. And from the roof, he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And behold, so David sent and inquired about the woman, and somebody said, this is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her and came to her. She came to him, and they lay with her, and she was cleansed from her impurity. So she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, so that she told David, I am with child. So look at David was in a season where he was supposed to be doing something, getting something out of that season. This is kind of what I'm taking out of this, is that he was supposed to be somewhere in this season. But for me, it feels like, and I don't know that this to be true, but it feels like he got a little complacent during that season. Maybe things were too good and he stayed back. And what was keeping him strong in the season of war, in the season of battle, instead of keeping himself strong and going into that season he was supposed to be in, he found himself in a moment of weakness. And a whole bunch of stuff broke loose in that affected David's life. But it was the season where kings went out to war and David didn't go. He wasn't present in that season where he was supposed to be. And so I was thinking about this in my own life, not that this is going to happen to me, but that in my good season, that I don't want to get complacent. That I don't want to get complacent and not be where I'm supposed to be in the season, getting out what God has for me, digging in and pressing in the areas that I need. Because it's so easy to go, well, God, I feel good about things. Everything's going good. Everybody else is going to battle. I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to relax for a minute. I'm going to chill out. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to have a vacation from my life with you, God, because things are so good. Well, that's where I'm going to find that's where Bill's going to find trouble. That's where David found trouble. And that's where Bill will find trouble. I guarantee it. I don't want to follow in those footsteps. I don't want to set myself up for failure. I want to set myself up for victory. And I need to be present in my current season. So we find ourselves in different seasons, but we can all get something out of where we are. And I want to look at what Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 says. Chapter 4, verse 11. It says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned, this is Paul talking. So he's writing to the church, right? And he's talking to them. And this is what he says. He says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I also know how to abound. Everywhere in all things, I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Look at those seasons. He's talking about whatever season he is in his life, he's learned to abound in it. No matter if it's a good season or a bad season, he's learned to get the most out of it. He's learned to be able to stay present in the season because he can do all things through Christ who strengthens him. Now, we don't only need Christ to strengthen us when we're in a bad season. I need his strength now in my season. I've started to feel this just recently. I took the last couple of days off of work because I felt like I was getting a little bit disconnect. And so I took a couple of days off of work. I usually go to prayer on Tuesday mornings in the morning at 9 o'clock at 5:30 in the morning over in Santee, men's prayer. And I got my shoes on. I was ready to go Tuesday morning. And I thought, you know what? I feel a little disconnect with you, God. I'm just going to take a walk with you. I just need to talk with God. And so I skipped it. I skipped the prayer meeting, but I didn't skip it to go back to sleep. I skipped it to go on a walk and get myself aligned with my God, because I need to do that on a personal level, because I want to be present in my season. I don't want to let this season get by without getting out of it what God has for me. It's really important for me. I'm only going to be here one time. I only get this once, and he's preparing me now for where he's bringing me. So if I miss this, I'm going to be in trouble later. So I have to make sure that I'm diligent in that. So I love that Paul says that. He says, look, I've learned. And so I need Christ to strengthen me. Even though I'm on the mountaintop, I'm happy as can be, guys. I'm telling you, I'm on cloud 9. But I need Christ to strengthen me, and I can do all things. I can make it through this season of blessing in my life and get the most out of it through Christ who strengthens me. I want to look at what James says in chapter 1, verses 2-4. So I don't know why I even mark it in my Bible anymore. We just get it on the screen, which is so awesome. I can stop with all those sticky notes in my Bible. So James says, talking to the church, says, my brother, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect result or perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Look, again, as you go through trials, as you go through seasons, as you go through whatever, various trials, count it all joy, no matter what it is you're going through, knowing that the testing of your faith is producing patience. The testing of our faith is producing something. It's perfecting us. Let patience have its perfect result, that you may be lacking nothing. There's something for us to learn in whatever we're going through. I know some of you guys, I know some of you personally, that you guys are going through some really hard times right now. I know it. I see it. We talk about it. We pray about it. But God is perfecting something in you. I just went through a really crazy season. God was perfecting something in me. He was preparing me for something, and I'm prepared. I'm lacking nothing for this season because he prepared me in last season and I was diving into it. Did I freak out a couple times? Yeah, I freaked out a couple times. I took a cup of oatmeal and I threw it against the wall one day. I told you guys about that, and I yelled and screamed, God, I don't know what you're doing in my life. All fired up, right? And I'm embarrassed in one moment to admit it, but I like to tell you guys about that because that's God's glory, that he could get me to that point and I didn't give up. I threw the stuff against the wall. I had oatmeal over everything in my place. Not mad at God, just frustrated with where I was at. But I had a breakthrough in that moment when I did that. I don't know if I ever told you guys about that. I had a breakthrough in that moment because I had to come face to face with God when I was that angry and know that I wasn't back, that I wasn't leaving. It was that moment where I said, you know what, God, throw me in the fire. And even if you don't, I'm not backing down. I'm not bowing down. I had to come to face with my Jesus in that moment and realize what I'm living for and that I'm ready to go through and endure and consider it all joy. And that's when a shift happened in my mind. That's when that shift happened inside of me that made it possible for me to get through to the end of that season. That was the end of my season. That was the final push through the season. It really was. It was the last hurdle, but it had to be done for me to get to where I was going. And something I don't feel that way. And everything broke loose after that. Let's see, where am I at? Okay. So yeah. So James, with facing various trials. So there's something for us here and now. In as amazing as the season might be, or as painful as the season might be, there's something for us to get out of it. So we need to consider it all joy. Joy doesn't mean you're happy. Joy means that you're hopeful. It means that you're expecting. It means that you could still have joy in your heart and not be the happiest person. And it's happiness and joy are not the same thing. And you know, it's good to be able to look to next season. It is good to look to next season. Why? Because you could look to next season for motivation, for something to work towards, right? Last season, I was looking forward to the season I'm in right now. We have to be careful you don't get too caught up in the season you're not in, but it's okay to look forward a little bit to the season that you're perspiring to be in, to the goals that you're setting, right? For motivation to get there, something to hold on to. Philippians, again, we'll go back to Philippians. I have a few verses out of Philippians today. Philippians 3:14. It says, this is Paul talking. He says, I press towards the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. He says, I press towards the goal for the prize of the upward call. You need to press forward. See, he was looking forward. He is pressing forward for the upward call of Christ Jesus. So that's something we need to do. It is good sometimes to look to next season for those things. And sometimes we need to look back at how far we've come. We need to look to last season. And why? Not because we want to be there, right? But because we're looking back to see how far we've come. To see all that God has done. So I could look back at next season for strength also, because I'm looking back for hope, because I'm going, you know what? God got me through that. He didn't bring me this far to starve me. Remember when the Israelites came out of Egypt and he brought them through the Red Sea and they get to the other side and they said, God, did you bring me out here to starve me? He didn't bring me this far to starve me. He split the Red Sea last season. He's got something for me this season. So we can look back to last season, to I call it the stones from the Jordan. If you in the story of Joshua, where they're going across the Jordan and he splits the Jordan, and when they get across, he says, Joshua, send 12 priests back in to grab or 12 guys, or whatever it was, to grab a stone out of the Jordan. And I want you to stack them in a memorial to me. And I want you to teach your kids about the day I split the Jordan for you, so that you'll never forget where you came from. You'll never forget that season in which I brought you here. Because if you can remember that God got you there, you'll remember that he's going to get you to where else he's taking you, right? If he got you this far, he's going to keep on. He didn't. Do you think God brought you all this way to leave you now? No way. He says he's faithful. I do have that verse later, but he's faithful to complete the work he started in you. And we'll bring that up in a minute. But so it's okay to look forward and it's okay to look back, but we need to stay present in the season we're in so that we don't miss where we're at, right? We don't want to be looking so far forward or so far back that we miss where we're at, because there's something right now, right? We can look to those things for motivation, but we need to be present wherever it is. You got to be here anyway. No matter what you're going through, you have to be here anyway. You might as well be present. I liken this to me being in high school, right? In school, period. I was a horrible kid, guys. I hated school. I ditched school. I didn't pay attention. I didn't do my homework. I didn't do anything. Look, I was such a bad kid in high school. I had a computer class, right? And I failed the computer class. And it was the last testing at the very end. And the teacher comes up to me and she goes, "You have an F." She goes, "You're going to fail." And I go, "Yeah." I go, "That's cool." I go, "But you know what that means, right?" And she goes, "What does that mean?" I go, "That means you get me for another semester. And if I'm here next semester, I promise you, I'll be twice as bad as I was this semester. You might as well pass me." And so she passed me, right? She gave me a D and passed me D minus, got me through her class so I didn't have to take it again. But look, I hated computer class and I got nothing out of it. I got nothing out of it because I wasn't present in the moment. I was throwing stuff at people. I had some girls sit next to me that did my homework. I did, and so I barely got through with a D minus. They let me through. I got nothing out of it. But guess what that did for me? Since I wasn't present there, now I'm horrible on computers. Now it takes me twice as long to do anything on a computer, right? If I want to get good, if God calls me into something where I need to use a computer, guess what I have to do? I have to take my time. I have to pay for a computer class, and I've got to go learn the stuff that I could have learned in my season of high school in my computer class if I just would have been present, and I had to be there anyway. Instead, I was present, but I wasn't present, and I got nothing out of it. It's the same thing with our seasons that God has us in, good or bad. We need to be present so we don't miss the skills that we need for next season. God will keep you going around. You're going to need to get those skills at some point. So I just kind of liken that to, and I just, when I was thinking about that, I felt like such an idiot because I missed so much in school and in different parts of my life, right? And now, now I got to go the long route. Now I got to go the hard way. Now it's tougher for me because I wasn't present in the season I was in. But I don't want that to be, look, I can't change what I did. I can only change my now. I can change right now. I can't change yesterday. I could change today. And if I change today, that changes tomorrow. So there we are, right? Let's see. So we need not to forget that our now is preparing us for our later, is preparing us for our future. And this is that verse that I had brought up, Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. It says, "Being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it in the day of Jesus Christ. We could be confident that Jesus is going to complete what he's begun in us. So that means that he's going to continue to walk us around until we get it, because he's working it out in us. He's going to complete it. So he's begun a good work in us, and that's going to be completed. We get to see how far that goes, but he's faithful to do that in us. So, there's this show. I don't know if you guys ever seen this show. I don't forget if it's called Life Below Zero or Alaska or The Wild or whatever, right? But it's all these people that live in Alaska, and they're surviving on the land and stuff like that, right? I've watched a couple of, I don't have TV anymore or any of that, but I've watched a few episodes before. And so these people live in Alaska in this rough terrain, environment, climate. It is not only the strong survive, right? So these winters are brutal. These people live off the grid, way out in the middle of nowhere. And so what they have to do is they have to prepare for next season, right? In the season that they're in, if they fail to prepare in the springtime, in the summertime for the winter, they die. They starve to death. It's really rough if they don't prepare enough. So they have all this amount of fish. Like I was watching this one, and they're out there fishing. Look, we need this many pounds of fish to survive the winter. We need this much wood chopped to survive the winter. It's the same thing in our lives. Whatever we're going through and whatever God's bringing us into, we need to be preparing for that wherever we're at. We're getting out of this season for next season, right? So that way we could thrive. Some of those people thrive in the wintertime because they prepared in the season before, right? So that needs to be us. And sometimes we need to survive on what we've gathered from last season. That's what that was reminding me of with those people from Alaska. They're surviving the winter from what they gathered last season. So sometimes we're going to have to rely on what we gathered last season in our walk with Jesus, with our relationships that we built in Jesus, right? With the people. Because if I didn't have the relationships if I was complacent last season, I didn't build relationships. If we didn't get involved in ministries, I wouldn't have those to rely on now in the season that I'm in. I wouldn't have godly counsel to go to if I didn't develop those things in that season. So sometimes we have to rely on what we gathered last season. If you remember the famine in Exodus with Joseph, remember he had the king had the Pharaoh had the dream, and the dream was basically that there was going to be 7 years of famine. So what they do? They got 7 years worth of stuff ready so that they would ready for that famine. They prepared for what was coming. And so God is preparing us for what's coming, but we need to do the gathering while we're here. Okay, so I'm going to get to the punch here. So here's 3 things we could be doing in every season we're in. Any season you're in, well, I'm going to give you 3 things that we could be doing to ensure that we get the most out of it. So we got 3 things in every season. Number 1, they're all building, okay? Number 1 is building a relationship with God, okay? So what does that look like? What does building a relationship with God look like? In order to have a relationship, there has to be relationship, okay? Just look at it like a person, like your wife or your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your kids or whatever, right? You're not going to have a relationship with them if you don't spend time with them. You're not going to have a relationship with them if you don't talk with them, if you're not honest with them, you have to have a relationship to have a relationship. So building a relationship with God means that we need to be in prayer. It means that we need to be reading his word. His word is how we hear God. We need to be reading his word and worshiping him. We need to be in relationship with God. Luke chapter 4, verse 4 says, this is Jesus. It says, but Jesus answered him saying, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but every word of God. Okay, we need to build relationship with God. This is one of the things that's going to ensure us for our season, because we need to live on that word. If we don't have it in us, if we're not learning God, if we're not knowing God, we're not going to be prepared for the battles that come our way. We're not going to be prepared for those storms. We're going to be weak, and we're going to get overtaken. We need to build it on a relationship with God. That includes being holy. That includes listening to his commandments. Jesus says the wise man listen to that. He says, the person who listens to my sayings and does them is like the man who built his house on the rock. And when the storm came and it beat violently, it wasn't shaken, right? It wasn't destroyed. But the one who doesn't listen to my sayings, it's like the one who built his house on the sand. And when the storm arose and it blew, it knocked his house down. We need to build our relationship with God. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we need to build a relationship in the body of Christ. We need people in our lives, guys, where God didn't make us to do this alone. You're not a lone ranger. There's no lone ranger in the body of Christ. God did not create any of us to be lone rangers. He created us to be in unity. He created us to be in community. He created us to be together, connected with different gifts to encourage and sharpen and uplift and hold each other and help each other along the way, right? So we need to build relationship in the body. What does that look like? It looks like groups, Bible study groups, women's groups, men's groups, prayer groups, those kind of things. That's what relationship looks like in the body. Being discipled. If you haven't been discipled, if you're a man, you need to find a man to disciple you. Look at somebody that you can relate with and somebody who you feel like is walking the walk in a way that you would like to walk it. And just ask them. Don't be embarrassed. Go up, Jake, brother. I need somebody to disciple me. I need somebody to be my accountability partner. I need somebody to mentor me. I need somebody. I'm looking at you going, I want to be where you're at. Can you help me along? Find somebody to disciple you if you haven't been discipled. Look, maybe you have been discipled. Maybe you're a more mature Christian. Find somebody to disciple. Look for somebody who's ready to be discipled. That's another way to build a relationship in the body, right? We need Paul's in our life and we need Timothy's in our life. Maybe you're ready to disciple somebody else. Look for somebody that you could relate with, that you think could relate with you, and see if maybe you could bring that person under your wing. Somebody who needs some counseling, somebody who needs some guidance, somebody who needs some mentoring. You'll be surprised. Somebody's looking for you. Somebody's waiting for you. So there's another way. Make disciples. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 through 25 says this. It says, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as in the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. We are made to lift each other up, to be. God has us in each other's lives for a reason. He doesn't want us living without one another. The day is approaching. We need to be pouring into one another, and we need to be poured into. It's important. We need people, and people need us. This is very important. So this is a very important step. It's just as important as step number one. We need step number one, a thing that we could be doing. These are things we could be doing in any season. You're going through a bad season, you could still be in groups. You could still be praying from the building, the number one, right? You could still be in relationship with God. You're in a great season. Same thing. So we need this. Number three, building the kingdom. This is something we can all be doing no matter what season you're in. A lot of people think that you need, in order to build the kingdom, oh, I'm just brand new to this. I'm just getting my feet wet. I've got so many problems, all this. No, those are excuses from the enemy. We need to be building the kingdom. You don't have to be doing a huge part in that, but we could all be doing something. What does that look like? Doing ministry, right? Ministry, getting involved in these outreaches. Anybody could do those things that I just put out there on the outreaches, right? Doing ministry, ministering to people. You could be serving at the church. If you don't know where you fit in that, if maybe you're that person, you're going, I'm brand new, I don't know where I fit into ministry. Go take life class at the Rock Church. I would suggest the Rock Church East County, because they have the coolest teacher there and the best staff, right? Because you got Rad Tonio and you got Tony Casales and you got all these awesome people. They're so loving. They're so amazing. They know what they're doing. go take life class. They'll plug you in. They'll help you realize what you're designed to do, how God designed you, and how you could start being used right now in the kingdom. How you could start building that kingdom. Doesn't mean you have to go out to the, be a missionary somewhere. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about being involved in ministry. You don't grow. There's no faster growth than being in ministry. You get involved in ministry, you start growing. When I first came back to the Lord, I didn't know. I was broken, guys. You guys know my story. I was destroyed. I was broken. I didn't know what to do with myself. I just knew I needed to do something. Well, I met Eddie Hernandez while I was at a men's group. I plugged myself into every group. Remember my 40 days? What was the one thing I promised God I was going to do every time in those 40 days? Besides promising the stuff I wasn't going to do, I promised God that I would read and I would pray every day. And and there was even the last one I read you guys last week. I realized that I even had one where I was worshiping for so long in the morning too, right? So I was doing those things without even knowing it, just knowing that I needed God. So I was doing that. Then another thing I started doing was I started putting myself in groups. I started putting myself in men's groups, prayer groups, all this stuff. And guess what happened? I started getting relationships. People started coming into my life that I needed in my life when I was struggling. People, instead of having nobody when I was in that moment of weakness, thinking about going back to Egypt, instead of having nobody to call, nobody to love me, and feeling all alone, I had put myself in position for God to use people in my life. And then to start to use me in other people's lives. Then I also, when I was at one of those men's group, I met Eddie Hernandez, who was in the DOC, Disciples of Christ. And I started going out every Friday night ministering to the homeless. I didn't know what I was doing. I just showed up because I knew I needed to do what God, and God started to grow me. He started to use me. He started to develop gifts in me I didn't know I had. And those things turned into the things I'm doing now. And it really grew me, and it kept me connected. It kept me strong, and it was just amazing. So ministry is super important. If you're not in a ministry, maybe you've been around for a long time and you were on a hiatus, you were taking a break, whatever. Time to get back in the battle. That's where we fight, is in the ministry. So time to get back in. Maybe you're brand new, go to life class, get plugged in so that they could get you in ministry. Or maybe you don't go to the Rock Church. Wherever you're at, I'm not trying to convert you. If you're in another church, they have some kind of something you could get involved in your church. Go ask somebody. I would just. So on the ministry verses, I have Hebrews 12, chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. And it says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. For the joy that is set before him endured the cross, despising shame, and has sat down at the right hand of God. Look, we're to be following after Jesus. What was Jesus doing? He was ministering. He went and ministered. He endured the cross. He endured with the season he had to go through for the good of others, right? We're to do, it says, therefore, since we have opportunity right now. There's people for us to witness to right now. And so let us run that race with endurance. And so there, and then Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 through 10 says this. It says, and let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially those who are at the household of faith. Look at how it starts at. Let us not grow weary while doing good. Don't stop. You just because you started the race good, it doesn't mean that a lot of times I remember at times, you go to work, a hard day of work, right? I go to work and it's real hard day, and I come home and I almost go, well, I worked really hard, so now it's okay to just do nothing, right? When there's still stuff to get done. And that's the thing. We don't want to grow weary while doing good. We need to stay on task. Let's finish this thing strong. We have opportunity now. You're never going to have the opportunity that's before you right now ever again. It's before you now. take advantage of it now. And that's, I'm not yelling at you guys. This is me talking to me. And this is the prayer I was having with Jesus the other day when I didn't go to men's prayer and I was talking to him. This is what I'm talking to God about. This is the conversation God and I were having, because this is not, and this I think applies for all of us, but I'm not sitting here pointing my finger at you guys trying to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you what God's been telling me that I need to do in my life. And I need to not grow weary while doing good. I need to not get, I worked so hard, I deserve a break. No, I want to, what Paul say? He says, I press towards the goal, towards the prize. I'm not stopping now. Okay. So there's this misconception that you need to know what you're doing before you get in ministry, but God can use you right where you're at. He's ready for you right now. Don't worry about all that stuff. God's ready to work with you wherever you're at, whatever hangups, whatever sin, whatever. Give him something to work with. He wants it. He wants you. Give him something to work with and he'll work with it. You just need to be willing. And again, I love this question, and I asked it already. If not you, then who? And here's the other part to that. If not now, then when? We need to ask ourselves that question. All right, so I'm going to end with this question here. What could you be doing better in this season on one of these steps? What one of these steps can you be doing? So here's what I'm looking for. This is the answers I'm looking for. I need to be reading my Bible more. I need to really focus in. I'm not doing good on the building relationship with God. I need to really press in to building my relationship with God right now. That's where I feel like I'm lacking. I'm not saying, this is just an example. Or I need to build my relationship in the body. I need to put myself in a group. You guys are in a group, by the way. This is one of them. But I would suggest, if you're only in one, find some more. Get personal with people. But anyway, I need to be in a group. I need to be discipling somebody. I need to be discipled. This is the question I'm asking. I'm asking you for you to answer this question so that you know what your next step is. And I'm going to tell you what mine is, because I like to do that. I like to tell you guys, I don't want to ask you guys a question, because sometimes it seems like people ask questions, you're like, man, that's easy for you to ask and not answer, right? So I always like to answer my own questions. Or maybe the answer is, I need to be built. I need to get into a ministry. I need to find a ministry that I could start working in. Maybe that's where you're at in this season, and that's one of the things that you need to be doing. So for me, God was talking to me about the ministries that I'm already in. And I need to be more organized. This is where God wants me. He wants me to, in my discipling, because I do have a couple guys in my life, I need to be more intentional. Because I am doing some of these things, but God was revealing to me that I allow too much in, and I need to whittle it down and focus on what I have in front of me and do it in excellence. That I need to do the discipling that I need to do. I need to do that in more excellence. I need to make a list of the people that I'm ministering to, and I need to make sure that I follow up, because so here's what happens is I go, I'll do that. And I get overwhelmed because I have a lot of people that I'm trying to minister to at once. But here's what happens. If I don't make a list, if I'm not intentional about it, it all gets lost in the shuffle, right? And then I'm not doing a good job on any of it. So God has called me to be more intentional about my ministry and the ministries that I'm involved in, the 99 ministry, all the ministries that I'm involved in. He's calling me to be more intentional about my timing in those things, because a lot of times I'm really bad at scheduling, and I need to be better at that. And so this is where me and God had this conversation. I have it in my notes, in my phone. When he was giving me this message, he was giving me this for myself. This is what you need to do. And so I've been talking to him about that. I'm in the process of getting some of that stuff lined up so that I can be better at what I do, because I want to do this. God's giving me gifts. God's giving me talents. He's giving me opportunities, and I want to make the most of where I'm at. I really do. I don't want to miss this. So that's me. I hope you guys got something out of this message. I hope that those 3 things that you guys will be thinking about, those building relationship with God, building relationship in the body, building the kingdom. I'd like to hear from you guys about that question. If anybody wants to chime in.